reality is, if we are truly able to deliver the scope of what the BSA is telling us to deliver, then in theory as a builder it's really, really good news. If you are the person that is managing a site, then you've got certainty from day one that your design is all ready to go, all your products have been selected, everything is compliant, it will all fit together perfectly, and you see there's a certain irony in that that's never going to happen. But the reality is, from a builder's perspective, then you know that you're going to get a sensible set of instructions and a decent kit of parts, and in theory it should go together really, really well.
It should be design and build, and what we do is we build and we design as we're going along.
There's an awful lot of people out there who probably don't understand it, don't want to understand it, or have no idea what's out there. And I think that's actually a big area where we've all got to get involved and start cooperating as well.
Within the Building Safety Act, what's also occurred is that there is an upskilling of the industry that's required in terms of this principal designer role, which affects every single scheme. So whilst we're concentrating, and a lot of the talks today is about the HRB work, the principal designer role is actually, I think there's a lack of understanding that this applies now to all buildings, so the client has to appoint a principal contractor or a principal designer on all schemes, all commercial schemes anyway. And actually how that gets taken forward into construction. So these people, as Neil alluded to earlier, have now legal responsibilities. So if they design something that's actually got a contravention on it, and that contravention gets taken through into construction, then actually the building safety regulator or the health and safety executive, who are the overarching governing body of all building regulations now, actually have got a very nice line of people to line up there to prosecute for building in that contravention.
I mean, the solution for me is all about early engagement. Early engagement is absolutely critical, and the beauty of that is they've seen the light. Either engaging early with a specialist contractor gives them a lot more certainty at stage 5. There are a lot less problems during stage 5, and that certainty and assurance is critical. But the reality that's best practice currently, and what will happen is that will become mandated best practice.
I think that encapsulates the whole point, that it's not the regulatory designs of buildings, it comes down to the individuals who are responsible. So they're in the best case, it should be in the best position to articulate why they're creating a safe building. So effectively OGSC in many ways, or Building Control, whoever, looking at very much on process and then where it's gone from, which then comes back to the issue of that competency. Because I'm sure we could all agree that a group of competent people will design a building regardless of the regulations and such.
I think it's also, it's not just the people probably in the room here, it's also, have we actually educated the clients? And I think the clients are going to have to understand the changing in the contracts and the weighting of things, but also the fact that we've all got to collaborate and work together. The cooperation, I think, has become obvious for all of us today. What we've been looking at from CHSG's point of view is how do we actually help the contractors and the supply chain to actually build some sort of structure within their businesses to actually ensure that competency is starting to come into how they put their roles and responsibilities into their day-to-day, because they're going to be just as carefully looked at as the PDs, and rightly so, and the architects. But actually, when you're a tier 1 contractor or a smaller contractor, how do you actually manage all of those people who you probably don't employ, but actually they're coming onto your site? And what does competency mean? Because it's all very well for somebody to turn up with a card and a piece of paper or whatever. What does it actually mean? And I know we have the definitions with experience and expertise and knowledge and behaviour, but when you're at the sharp end and somebody turns up on a Monday morning, what are we actually going to look for, and how do we set a standard? And I think if we all go off and set up our own little areas of how we think competency should be, I think as an industry what we're trying to do is talk to a lot of the contractors to actually say, can we help you to actually build something? So if you go from one contractor to another, the piece of paper is valid and somebody says, I've got one of these that's got X on, actually it's fully understandable to the person that they go to work for in 2 months' time, 2 years' time, whatever it is. And I think we have a responsibility to try and do that.
Start to list what you know. Start with knowledge. Start to understand what you know, and where you can, show where it came from. Was it toolbox talk? Was it a demonstration? Did you learn something on site? And then where did you take that knowledge and build some experience? So where did you go out to site and use that, and what did you do and what did you learn? But that doesn't make them competent. That just means they know how to drive a car. What they need to do then is to develop a skill, and the skill, from my point of view, is I can do that thing with that product unsupervised. The final bit is the behaviours, and again, the behaviours of people go, I don't understand what that means. What's that? So if you're a carpenter, one of the first things they'll tell you is to measure it twice, cut it once, and to keep your finger out of the saw when it's going round. Really simple things. That's an example. Pharmaceuticals have done it. The finance people have done it as well. So I think if everybody in the room today, you look at yourselves on that, what knowledge have I got, where have I got the experience in doing that, what skills do I think I have, and what behaviours have I got, and then start to look at what will that allow me to do, and the thing that I think is missing in all of this, with what products.
I think if we realise that the previous regime is why we got to the event that happened that made the Building Safety Act turn up, I think it should all give us some confidence actually that the reason we are here is because actually either we weren't very good at designing things, we weren't very good at building things, we weren't particularly good at designing and creating products, we weren't very good at interfacing them together, we were awful at watching it being made, and nobody really had a holistic idea about what was going on in the first place. So I think if we acknowledge that's why we got to where we are, then all this is just tightening that up. Fundamentally, having the customer at heart is what this should be all about. And I think, by the virtue of the fact that the room's full, I think there's a lot of people that are intrigued at how that works.
If we're going to have, a very iconic building, that will be very bespoke, and we could do that in a different way. So there are skills that we still want. But I do think that an educated client is, and I'm probably going to be shouted down, is probably something that maybe a lot of you deal with, but there's not a lot of them around out in the marketplace. Are they going to understand what we're trying to do? Will they want a modular building is the other one as well. But I do think that, I don't think this act really has been brought forward in the fact that it is going to change probably the way we construct, the way we look at things, and how we're going to educate either end of those chains. And then at the other side, when you look at the costs, if you're held up at the end, you can't get your certificates, somebody's going to be jumping up and down because there's all this huge space that they want to actually use, and there won't be a means of finding that cost now. So I think the world is a huge threat in the commercial change, and have we actually put that out well enough?
So again, the principal designer role now, and I was with a large architectural practice just yesterday, and I was explaining what my interpretation of this role is. So this role is now written into legislation. It came into force on the 1st of October. An architect or the principal designer, the client is appointing either the PC or the principal designer. They are now certifying the design, and they're certifying that the construction meets all building regulations. For me to serve an initial notice on a project now, which is not a HRB, I have to take that duty holder name, I have to put it onto the certificate, and I have to get a signed declaration at the end. And just the other day somebody said, what does this actually mean? And it says, well, it means that you can no longer turn around and say building control have approved this, it's acceptable. It means that you're now taking responsibility for this design and for the construction.
Certain experience with the BSR, with the new regulator and the HSE coming into the built environment, concerns over their first capacity. I think that's going to affect the industry significantly. And there's obviously that's linked to other regulators, building control officers, and fire safety arena. The fire authorities I'm particularly familiar with. There is a significant lack of capacity, and also I'd suggest competency in those areas while people are upskilled.
Joe's next point is about subcontractor becoming the unintentional designer, and that lack of knowledge and that uncertainty plays its way down through where you've put a project into the specification right down to where the subcontractor is actually going to install it, and it doesn't quite tie up, so they become the unintentional designer.
Because somebody simply has procured the wrong screws. The biggest threat I think that we've got is at the trade counter. You can imagine somebody turning up at a trade counter and he said, I've run out of that fireproofing stuff. You know the stuff I mean? You know the pink stuff? I've got, what have you got? And out comes, well, we've got some stuff over there. And they don't look at the parameters, they don't look at what it can be done, and it gets sold. So there's that lack. There's a huge amount of training that needs to be done, particularly where people are selling stuff.
So I think that's kind of the unintended outcome of this. You get safer buildings, they just happen a lot slower, and for a whole year, in theory, nothing's going to get finished.